think I
have a
get a
good
word
chat.
in edgeways, do I, with you?
Behave yourself. Now, anyway, Caroline, after it's been at least 5, 6 months since we last spoke, probably 5 months. We've had a lot going on. I've had a lot of personal issues myself. I'm not going to get into. I've been delayed with things and whatnot. A lot of things have happened in my life which I'm dealing with, and it's all good. But there are massively pressing issues at hand. We're going to go through quite a few things today. We're going to meet back in, say, a week or two as well, Caroline.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Do a part two, a
That'd be good.
follow up.
Do a part two follow up. So, first off, right, there's a couple of things I want to run through. I know there's a couple of things you really want to run through. First off, let's just cover the huge backlash you had with all this common purpose meeting. Can you just explain it once and for all? Because in the groups that I post, now I'm not big on Twitter. I've got a profile 10 years ago, 9 years ago. I posted about 6 times. I never don't even bother with it. I know you're on there. I know friends are, and they've got quite a bit of a following now. But for me, the groups, the WhatsApp groups, the Telegram, all the groups I send to, and my Facebook lot, they're just saying, I don't get why Caroline, I'm following her. I want to follow, I want to believe in her more, but I don't know why she just put all this out. And where did she get it? It's all these questions in and around it, you know? So do you just want to clarify things once and for all, for a minute or so, how it come about?
Okay, well, it was going back to the summer, and a friend
Yeah,
of mine was going through YouTube videos. She goes through so many videos, but what she tends to do is look at the comments more than she actually watches the videos.
I
And
do
she
now as
just
well.
came, I don't know what the video she was that she was watching or had the link to, but she saw that somebody was desperately trying to get people's attention to for everybody to click on this particular link. So she did, and she never sent me the link. She never would have expected, I guess, uh, how strong this, as you say, the backlash would be. But she
Yeah.
did find a guy talking through some common purpose slides.
So
And this
this is
was,
the actual guy on the meeting, on the online meeting.
I don't know, I don't even know that much. And she basically, her viewing history eventually disappeared. She had clicked on it. I think she must have come away the once and gone back on. And
Yeah,
she, for some reason, you'd have to ask her, but she prefers to keep in the shadows, if you like.
yeah.
She ended up by having to take pictures of every slide. Now, of course, you know what it's like when you've got slides on a video. You
Yeah,
can't just scroll across and copy and paste and transfer all that information
exactly the same.
onto a
No,
Word.
I explained that to the group. I've got some great info now, and I've snapshotted about 6 photos of it, and I just have to type it all out because I want to piece it together. I can't copy it. It's just there on a photo, so I know exactly what you're saying there.
Yeah. So
It's
so
genuine.
basically, and then eventually the viewing history disappeared because I did say, "Oh, have you got it?"
Yeah,
Um, but she sent it to me as a hard copy, and she because I was busy. Remember, I was busy in the garden a lot last in the middle of the summer, and
I
she'd
know. Yeah,
posted it. She'd sent me some seeds because I don't have that many out. There's not that many outlets around here for seeds. And so she posted, because remember we were on lockdown, so she posted the seeds and this hard copy. And I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't do anything with that hard copy. I didn't even know what was in that. I just put it to one side, and because she
yeah,
never reminded me and of any significance. And then I did a video at the beginning of November, and she said, Caroline, it's about time you covered that common purpose meeting based in really essentially the South Wales area. But it
yeah.
so she basically sent me the information again, had altered a few typos, and I thought, wow, this is it. And I firstly covered the meeting, and I mean, there were some people that just wanted me to come in, do the business, and go again. But I had
Yeah.
spent some time looking to see who these people were, who were the guest speakers. So, common purpose was a something as well, which was a concept that wasn't known about particularly
Yeah.
by a lot of people. So it's trying to fit in so much into one meeting. But I had left most of the 5G discussion out. And then I
Yeah.
thought, well, wow, after the first one, the first show, and I'd gone through all the people, I'd sussed these people out, how they linked together.
Yeah.
And they were, these were real people. It wasn't made up. And
Oh,
of
completely.
course,
Yeah, I've googled them and searched them. They're all
yeah.
yeah.
So of course, with it being Wales, I wasn't familiar with all those people, so I had to check it out. And I just thought, wow, because it's 5 or 6 months on from the actual meeting, it actually made a lot more sense now to cover it.
Absolutely. And then
Because if I
yes,
had covered it in May or June, people would never have believed what was, that people could start saying dishonestly honest information, and nobody would have believed that somebody from Common Purpose would actually consider saying that people could be sedated to be vaccinated. So why would you have to be sedated to be vaccinated? And then they were talking about, I did a follow-up then on 5G because I expected the 5G part to be taken down. And it seems such a shame to take the whole YouTube video down because of one aspect, because there was enough material, more than enough material for a part one. So
I
I
get
thought,
that.
yeah, and it's interesting actually because people like a couple of other truth tellers, they uploaded, one of them actually uploaded part one onto their website. They never actually sought permission, but so it's a two-edged sword. I was pleased that more people will get to know about the Common Purpose meeting, but I also obviously I do my own thing, so I didn't want to also be associated with other people because then you get accused of being a shill. So it's really, really a very fine line, isn't it, in this the business, if you like, except there's no money in it. Well, not for me anyway.
Oh, really?
No,
Yeah.
no, absolutely not.
Course.
So then I
Yeah.
followed it up. So a few days later, well, I mean, it just got so much attention. I had people, other people from the truth movement, wanting the slides. And I said, genuinely, I haven't got the slides. And I said, in the end, I said, to be perfectly honest, I know some of these are shills anyway. And if anybody found out who the person was, they could be murdered. I don't want that on my conscience. The fact that they have given a gift to the men and women of the UK, I'm not going to shop them. I'm not a snitch. I mean, so all this psychological pressure from the people you've spoken to, or one or two people who don't believe me. Well, that's it. I mean, even if they had the slides, they probably still wouldn't believe it. And I haven't got I'd rather press on with the people who do genuinely believe. But there's nothing wrong the thing is, the subject matter that was covered in those slides all fits together with the campaigns we've got now in the media, and the linking. I mean, I think the dishonestly honest, and the fines the police were imposing, and they have been imposing fines whether people have paid them or not. This has been going ahead, but then they've been talking about fines if you're not vaccinated, fines if you share material, like for example watching our video today. If you're caught watching videos like this, then the police were wanting to fine those people or imprison you, or a bit of both, depending on whether you're gonna cough up or not. And then there was a discussion as to from was it the they were saying, well, what's the prison service like at the moment? How much space is there in the prisons? And it really, really makes it very real, because you have all these alternative media outlets that will talk a lot about the actual Common Purpose itself and the names. But until you actually bring it to a real life situation which is affecting the people right here, right now, and it's going to affect the way they run their lives from now on. It really is obviously very impactful. So I then did a follow-up at the end of last week, and I just said,
not seen this
yeah,
one.
I did. I think I did. It was Friday. I did one that was a part 3, and it was basically trying to unpick a bit about the background behind Common Purpose and how Tony Blair would have seen this as an opportunity to have a parallel government working out of Whitehall. And you know, as the Brexit campaign manager, we knew that over 90% of the civil servants in Whitehall actually voted to remain. So if you know, the number of people, graduates from Whitehall who've been on a Common Purpose course. So there's all this brainwashing, and they obviously live in this parallel universe, if you like. So it's all, but the thing is, people didn't believe that, or didn't realise perhaps, that the Queen is very well in with this. Is so much so that I remember on Facebook about 3 or 4 years ago that there was a letter on there. Somebody had taken a Photoshop of it and put it on there, and basically it was a letter with the Queen's picture at the top. So it was Queen's headed paper. It was Common Purpose. The address was number 10 Downing Street, and it was a letter from David Cameron, because Common Purpose has had its headquarters actually at number 10 Downing Street. So when people say what is going on in Parliament, I've already said, well, the House of Lords has had no power really since 1911. So you get all this fluff and fluff in the media about how the House of Lords is not fit for purpose. Well, that was done on purpose. It's not necessarily the peers' fault. It's the way it's all being constructed and connived for 100 years. And now you've got, in actual fact, the true government is coming out of number 10, but I think Julia Middleton, she started the charity in 1989. And this, when you set up a charity, if you're wanting charitable status, one of the prerequisites is that you've got to make sure that all the minutes of meetings, the agenda, are kept open for public scrutiny. That's a qualification for the tax relief. But of course, Common Purpose is really not talked about, because all the meetings are held behind closed doors. So to actually ask for evidence of secret meetings, you know, either you accept it or you don't. But we have been seeing the rollout of 5G. They did mention Piers Corbyn actually in the Common Purpose meeting. They didn't say who he worked for, but they just said, well, why BBC Wales did you cover this in Glastonbury when he was speaking? And the BBC were saying, well, we're effectively caught between a rock and a hard place. If we don't cover anything at all, then we will get accused of this. And so they had to take an executive decision. And we were talking about Glastonbury before we came on air. So.
Yes. But Piers has got enough of a profile for them to want to cover him. I mean, look, he's the brother of the guy that could have been Prime Minister of the country, so he's got a profile. What I've always thought about him is, where does he get his money from? He seemingly doesn't work. He's not got any particular income. He might have properties. He might have done a business years ago. He might have residual money coming in. He doesn't need to work. So I don't know. I don't know personally. I would hate to think he's part of the NIT, because, like, if David Icke turned out to be in these others, I think I would give up, because I think, well, fair play to you. You know what? You've won, because there's no need for us to do any more. You've got these figureheads in all of these segments and these groups with these followings. You're covering all bases. But I don't think that is the case. But we've got to be very careful about who to trust and have this discernment, which I'll talk about that word in a little bit. But I think it's spot on, Caroline. Thanks for covering that, because I mean, I know I've known you for a little bit now, and for a while, and we've been speaking. I know you're totally genuine. I can definitely trust you. I know that because I just know it. I know it. But I think a lot of people who I spoke to in Wales as well, even friends of, Anna Brees and ones like that, which we spoke about before, they're scared, I think, because it was very close to home. When they found out of the people in Wales that were talking about that, I think they felt immediately like the pressure was on them, and it was going to start with Wales. Wales was going to be the template, and then it was going to be rolled out from there. And Wales was going to be used as the blueprint, if you like, for the rest of the country and probably the rest of Europe or whatever. So I think it was fear that they were acting on and not wanting to believe it. I passed the fear stage 5 years ago. So I immediately, when I hear information like this, I don't get scared anymore. I have to deal with it. Plus the crap I've had to deal with this year, I've accepted. What I did about 5 years ago is accept death. And I think once you've accepted death and you say to yourself, you know what, when it gets so bad, because I lost pretty much all my money 5 years ago and I started again. I'm a business and everything. I started over. I said, just pretend I've died, right? Let's just pretend I've died now. Suddenly people do die suddenly in life. Pretend you've died. Now go from here. Every day is a bonus from here. And go from there. So anything I hear now, I just deal with. Because say, right, I'm on bonus day number, 890 or whatever. And go from there. So the fear factor I don't care about anymore. And that overrides me not wanting to talk about stuff and hiding anything and keeping things from the forefront. Because like you said before we came on, it's keeping that in the forefront. It's applying ourselves and making sure this is always in the spotlight, because it does on a subconscious level reach people, and it really does. Good example, 6 months ago at the start of near the sort of April, May time, I was up the park and we saw our old neighbours and they said, better keep 6 feet, just to be on the safe side, just stay there, we'll chat to you over the railings and whatnot. And they're lovely people, the loveliest neighbours you could wish for. And saw them about a week ago when I got back from Germany. They said, I won't say exactly what they said, I'm getting in trouble, but anyway, it basically, without me saying too much, they basically said, this nonsense. What is going on? Have you seen the latest figures? Have you seen this? Have you seen that? 50,000 plus kids a day starve of malnutrition, And what are we being locked down for this? They were really going at it, and they just had enough because the lady's mother, they can't visit her. They visited her once over the green. She sat in her wheelchair one side of the green. They sat up on the steps, and apparently she was in hysterics, wanting to grab hold of them. It was horrible. And it's one awful example. But people now, I think it's needed to tail on this long. If Corona had gone away, COVID-19 had gone away by July, right? If it had just gone away, most people that have woken up in that time since will still be asleep now. You agree with that?
Yeah, I do. But I also have reservations about the numbers of people who are awake and aware, because, you were touching upon the people in the movement who may or may not be real truth tellers. And it's a very difficult one, because I take it back to the Secret Covenant, which was written, I've covered a couple of times. I know then other people have covered it. And it's basically these people who we don't generally see. I mean, these are people higher up than Bill Gates and Tony Blair, and they're the ones that are pulling the strings, and they're the ones who keep their hands seemingly clean. Okay, so it's Satan had, or Lucifer, one of them, basically had done a pact with Jesus on Mount Hermon, I believe, and said he promised Jesus that the dark side would tell the people what they had planned. So, I mean, who are you going to use? If you're on the dark side, are you going to be using really good people who are going to turn around and say, well, hang on, that's not right, you can't do this? Or are you just going to use people that you're going to pay to be compliant and pass the message on? So that's the quandary that perhaps somebody like myself, finds themselves day to day, because I know that a lot of this material, they can quote 80% truth and then 20% fiction. And someone like myself, who goes out there, who has the balls basically to put herself out there and then comes out, and then with that 80% truth and 20% fiction, then somebody will say, well, hang on, I thought that Caroline was all right. But then she's come out with something really crazy. She hasn't checked this out. And that's the problem I personally face. But, going back to the faith bit, you were saying about how you felt about if today is your last day. I mean, I used to go to church. It was quite a forward-looking church compared to the most other churches. It was an African Caribbean church, and the pastor had a really good way of explaining this. He said, and people might not think this, but he'd say, do you know, he'd come out with stories of talking to people, and they were fit as fiddles, and then they died in 10 or 15 minutes. Inexplicable reasons for death. And he would say, God has a plan for you because you are still here today. Now, you work out what that plan is, and take, be blessed, feel blessed. Now, sometimes people might get up in the morning and think, well, hang on, I don't actually feel blessed at all. I don't really want to face this day. I'm going to have this conflict, that conflict. But before we came on air this morning, I was talking to a lady, and she was saying, look around in your kitchen. And she said, look at the objects that make a noise. And then she said, what do you see? And it was like, if you focus on negativity, things that make a noise, that's all that sticks out. And you can't focus on the rest of the beautiful kitchen. But but then look at something. I have got some flowers. I've got two vases of flowers, which are particularly gorgeous. So I'm looking at that. And then she says, well, focus on that, and how you can be a much more balanced person if you focus on positives as well.
Absolutely.
And I think, the strength is within us.
Absolutely.
And God allows us, I'm wobbling now. God allows us to get up in the morning and to start that day afresh. And it's very easy to think, oh, look what I did yesterday, or look what I did last week. And it's like, say, right, okay, this is the first day of the rest of my life. What am I going to do different to what I did yesterday?
Absolutely. As Anna said in Frozen 2, do the next right thing.
Yeah.
With you on that, Caroline. With you on that, my darling. It's perfect. As you said about that, this was the first book. I just sort of held it up. This is the first book I ever read on all this. Daniel Estulin, Shadow Masters. And it goes in, and this was in 2010, and it goes into I'm rereading it now and making notes, actually, because it's been stuffed away for a number of years. And it says about that, the cloaks and the subdivisions and the pact with the dark side and everything else. And do you think that's the karmic law bit, which they have to tell us this when their plan, when they're ushering this in? And yes, it's been sped up through 2020, because I firmly believe they've been behind on their plan, which is why I've been saying to the certain groups, something's going to happen 2020 and afterwards, because they're nowhere near where they need to be come 2030. Yeah, which me and you knew, Caroline, years ago, that was the agenda. 2030, they wanted their plan installed by 2030. Smart cities, the grid, the cloud based, everyone attached to the cloud. Come back to that in a second. And 10 years, and I thought, well, end of 2019, they're nowhere near. When it just over 10 years away, something big has to happen. It's happened. But these cloaks in and around sort of, and this is what makes me think about Q. I just spoke to a guy before we came on who spoken to, ex-military. He's got fairly high level contacts over the years. Some of them have passed away now. A great guy. I might do a small podcast with him next week, because he's just getting into it. He's got no following, but he's just getting into it. And he said, these people, this has been in the plan for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And he firmly believes in Trump. He firmly believes in Trump. And that's where I'm having trouble, because I'm saying, look, I do feel at the minute we're being led astray almost. I do say we have to be taken to the wire. And I've said this all year long. Said it when we spoke April, May, and June, I said we have to go to the wire for everyone to wake up, because if we don't go really literally nearly to the grave, we're not going to realise just how fooled and tricked we've been. Like I said, if this ended a few months ago, we'd just go back to normal and nothing really would change. And some things do have to change, I believe.
You're spot on. You're absolutely spot on. And no one's really sort of explained it exactly like that before. Until things get really bad, and it's got to be for a period of time, then, as you say, after that first lockdown, there are lots of people who thought, all right, we're going back to normal, and we're going to be flying, and we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that, and okay, so it's dented our savings, and some of us have lost our jobs, but we'll get new jobs in the care sector. So we've had another lockdown. Now the thumb screws are starting to really, really hurt. For a lot of people. In today's paper, we've got Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, now sort of saying, well, you're all going to be paying for me splashing the cash with the helicopter money, and you didn't think you were going to get away with it, did you? And so we're going to have now, and he's talking about inheritance tax, and I know so many people who come from, dare I say it, middle-class backgrounds, who've put a bit by, who believe in the government. They probably were Tory voters all their lives. And it's going to come as a shock to those people, because you see, a lot of those people have just retired, or they came to a position where actually the lockdown gave them an excuse to retire. And so they think their cash is safe in their house. And of course now Rishi is going to come along and snaffle a lot of that money. And that's just for starters. We don't even know what they're going to do with the climate change debacle. But the Brexit thing, of course, I came into this really from the referendum, the politics side, rather than the truth side. So that's got a lot of advantages, actually, because I see more clearly how narcissistic and psychopathic the government is. And if we don't get ourselves extricated from the New World Order, then we are just going to be like every other country in the world, living under the jackboot of China, the UK, US elites. Until you get to that point, and then people will look around and say, oh, you were right. It doesn't give me any satisfaction for people to say, oh, well, you were right, Caroline. In actual fact, most people, I've been asking people to prep for over a year now, because we were supposed to leave the European Union before, and I just thought, oh, the government's, they're not doing it properly. They're really not. And I've been to various meetings. I never get invited back to these meetings. I don't know why. I remember going to one meeting and there was a guy there called Campbell Bannerman, and he was a guy who was in UKIP, he was in Tories, he was a member of the European Parliament, and he was extolling the virtues of something called the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement, which is then renamed as the Canada Trade Agreement, which is like TTIP by the back door. Okay. And I remember putting my hand up and I said, can I ask a question? And I think it was Montgomery from, is it The Times? He was Tim Montgomery. Yeah, I'm not sure, Caroline. Yeah, it's a really nice guy. And he said, yeah, Caroline, because he didn't know who I was at that point, obviously. So I said, does everybody know what this trade deal, what's in the small print? And I actually turned around because the world's media were there. And I thought, there's no point. I was at the front row, so there's no point in me speaking because they can't get the how long ago was this? When was this, Caroline? This was 2 years ago now. It'd be 2 years ago. So I actually turned round and spoke to the audience, and I said, do you know what this in the small print about something called Mode 4, about free movement of people? And not one person out of 200-300 people that were there, and some of them were from UKIP, some MEPs from UKIP at the time, no. And I said, well, Campbell, Mr. Bannerman, I said, well, are you going to tell everybody about the number of job losses that this will entail? And he's like, oh my God, who's let this woman in? And so then David Davis, so basically, he said, there'll just be a few thousand. just a few thousand. Right, well, I thought, well, you tell that to those families in the shires up north, and that
Yes.
their family could be impacted by this CETA, Canadian trade deal. Oh,
Yeah.
because it wasn't going to affect them, was it? So then I sits down, and then David Davis comes along. Well, he's from Yorkshire, I'm from Yorkshire, and I thought, right, I'm going to get you on the spot now. I can't remember what the question was on that, but I put my hand up, and I said, oh no, basically they rushed David Davis out. He wasn't allowed to answer any questions.
Really?
Yep. So that was a non-starter. So then I asked for another question, and Tim said, "Sorry, you've asked one." So it was on rations, but yet somebody I think from British Aerospace was able to ask two questions. So it was obviously not on. So that was his way of saying, Caroline, we don't want you asking any more questions, and if we could bundle you out of this meeting, we would. I haven't been to any of those sort of meetings since, strangely. I don't know why.
Well, yeah, I can take a hazard a guess, but it's the group, isn't it? It's the ilk, and I firmly believe it's the ilk that's got these politicians now in the UK, especially with the withdrawal agreement, the UK withdrawal agreement, the European withdrawal agreement. I think it's a terrible piece of legislation. I don't know how much you've read of it yourself, but it personally sends shivers down my spine, Caroline. And I'm right in the middle of writing to my old MP, Nicky Simmons Thomas from Torvine. He's a Torvine MP. I'm writing a letter to him right now. I used to play, well, now and again, we used to play in a car park, football behind his aunties. He used to come out now and again and play with us. And he's only 2 years older than me, 2.5 years older. Used to play footy with us for a couple of years. I've referred to that. He's worked on a case for my sister going back when he first started out as a solicitor. So he knows who I am, and I'm firmly asking him to state certain things in Parliament before Parliament wrap up before the end of the year, because I think certain things have to be said in Parliament, possibly for the protection of us, before this is essentially put to bed, or what they want put to bed. I don't think Boris, Hancock, I mean, these people are I can't even say their names, Caroline. I said in the election, I personally put on my ballot, I do not consent, I hope most people did. Don't think they did. A lot of them voted for Boris. And I think they're getting all they deserve. These people now are really seeing what these people are. And they're subhuman as far as I'm concerned. But I do think they're over a barrel. The guy I just spoke to thinks Boris is completely compromised. He's not evil, but he's just compromised. That's what he believes. And his partner, who's potentially, apparently, supposedly, into nefarious acts with certain spiritual entities, shall we say. And he doesn't want any involvement of that. And he was told of the plan a year or two ago and didn't want any part of it. Is now just playing it out from the EU goons that are controlling these people, and have all got them compromised and essentially blackmailing them. And it does seem like that, because just like Blair, this has all the remnants of Blair and who was his goon at the time when they went into Iraq and they were trying to get all the excuses and running it through Parliament. Remember they were ushering it through immediately? Was it Brown? Not Brown. Is it Brown?
You're talking about Brown and Blair for
the
Iraq War?
Yeah, back in 2002, 2003, yeah. They were running around like headless chickens, yeah, trying to ratify certain acts and whatnot, and they were essentially, you could tell, they'd just been given specific orders, and they really weren't aware before that what was really going down. And I do believe just when they were given words, they had a certain amount of time, a certain window to usher things through, and it seems like that with Boris and Hancock now. They're just completely, they've been bought and paid off. They've probably been promised, lands beyond Antarctica and bloody whatnot. Who knows? 600 prostitutes in heaven. Who gives a shit, really? But these people, I don't think they're necessarily evil, but they're completely compromised and blackmailed by these goons in the EU.
The thing is, right, I don't know. And I'll give you some examples of why I'm not sure. Simply because on Boris's, if we look at Boris, for example.
Yeah.
lots of people in London know what he got up to as a London mayor, and I'll just leave it there because it isn't known outside the city of London. But when I came back from holidays a couple of years ago, the taxi driver who picked us up, he got talking about politics. Surprise, surprise, with me, and he said, "Oh, well, this is what he did," and so there's been hundreds and hundreds of people that actually do know what he does in London. So there's that aspect, and then there's aspects of him being reported in the newspapers as burning notes in front of homeless people with camera, and of course they've both denied that. You know, he's known to not know how many. You know, his private life is pretty. A bit of it has been open, so I don't know how bad you have to get for people to sit up and think, well, is this guy? Should he be telling us what to do? What else about Boris? He gets paid £75,000 for a 2-hour speech, and you'll find Tories, you'll find Brexiteers who'll say, well done to him. But in actual fact, that can easily be seen as some sort of money laundering activity. And this is where people say, well, it could be worse. It could be worse. It could be Corbyn. Well, I don't know. I mean, a sin is a sin, and we all sin. So it's like, for these guys, they might as well be hung for a sheep as well, hung for a lamb. How much more does he have to do? Now, you say about people don't know about the politicians. People like Gordon Bowden, God rest his soul, because he's now passed on. He did spend quite a lot of time uncovering matters of people who were implicated, and I have to choose my words carefully, but implicated in both the Panama and the Paradise Papers. All those politicians are basically around and abouts today, and many of them are still sitting in the houses. So how bad do things have to get? How have they been compromised? You might have some politicians who don't actually claim their salary because they have such intensely intricate business affairs that would have to come out into the open if they claimed a salary. So you get Brexiteers who say, oh, isn't that wonderful? Well, if you're on £22 million a year with a private investment account, then getting £80,000 in the House of Lords, the House of Commons, well, it's just like pay money, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you see, what they don't realise is, the fact is, why would they be in there?
Alright, so sorry. I'll cut this out. I need to quickly answer the door. I've got a delivery. Very quick. I'll cut it out. 1 second.
Hi everybody, it's Caroline Stevens, seeking the truth, liaising with Wales. So people in Wales have really become very interested in that common purpose meeting, for sure. And I'd like to thank everybody for sharing those videos into, especially the Welsh groups. Matt's coming back in a minute, hopefully. This is part 1 anyway. We're going to be doing part 2 in a couple of weeks' time. For those people who've just joined, I've got Matt Shaw, and he's filming on Zoom. And maybe he's not going to come back. It's that time of year when everybody's getting parcels delivered. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got politicians that are still there. They're committing treason every day. They take advice from foreign powers. So not one of them is innocent, is fit to run the country. That's my thinking anyway. And they've had hundreds of years to put those people in place. The best laid plans of mice and men. So Gordon Bowden's work, what happened to Gordon Bowden's work? He did such great work exposing these criminals, or alleged criminals. What happened to it? So we're no better off knowing that information. And that's why sometimes, is it better not to know? Somebody's coming back.
I'm back. Sorry, Caroline, about that.
You sorted.
I was getting something picked up. Do apologise. It's supposed to be 3:30 and they came early. So anyway, right, as we were. Sorry, my love. I can just cut that bit out anyway, so no worries.
It's on Facebook. I was just talking to people whilst filling in the gap.
Are we live?
Yes, we are.
Well, there we are then. Come on, it's fine. Come on, guys. Sorry about that. Do apologise.
This is all natural. This is the real deal here. I was, when you're talking about parcels, I mean, we've never, because of the lockdowns, we've never had so many parcels delivered for ourselves or for our neighbours. But, it's also traumatic because A, you don't get to see the goods before you get them, and you might get disappointed. And then B, we ended up with 2 pairs of footwear we never ordered, but then we didn't get what we had ordered. So it's not easy. I don't know. I love to go shopping, which is obviously an activity that has been slightly curtailed with the non-essential closures. I just think it's terrible. And especially the elderly people who really are not going to be on the internet. The elderly's been really badly affected, and the children who are self-harming now and committing suicide. And I just think it is, and that's why I want people to, we do need to look after each other, that's for sure. But anyway, sorry, you were talking about the politicians. I was just going to say that all these MPs have been committing treason for so long now. It's not if they commit high treason, it's how often they've been doing it.
How often, yeah, I know. It's happening constantly, yeah. And they're putting these acts in place and everything else to sort of safeguard themselves. But again, they're just acts. I'm not going to get into the Magna Carta stuff on this, but they're ring fencing themselves to a certain extent. And I firmly believe it only takes a few 100,000 people to come in and around that and break it down. But I think it's impossible. Because if someone told you the secret tomorrow, Caroline, of solving everything, how do you get the word out there? How do you get everybody to believe you?
Well, of course, since I saw you, since we did our interviews, I had my YouTube. Yeah, it was about the time you were doing the interviews before. My YouTube channel was taken down. So, and if we have an energy grid go kaput, shall we say, and
I'll put that in a second. Yeah, go on.
So basically, nobody's videos will get seen anyway. When I stood for UKIP, somebody for the general election of 2015, hastily add, so that was 5 years ago. I learnt so much. And if people say, "Oh, you say you don't believe in political parties," no, I don't now. I didn't know then what I know now. I mean, we're all on a learning curve, but absolutely. I did learn a lot. And what UKIP had done, they had a sponsor who'd produced some DVDs. So even if your YouTube channel had been taken down, for example, I used to distribute these discs for people through the letterbox, and it was about the treason within. Was it Cicero said, "A nation cannot survive from treason within"? And of course, this was all about the EEC and Ted Heath taking us in without consent. Consent. And that was the disc we used to put in, or I used to put in my constituencies' letterboxes. I think it's really powerful. And you could have played that without being on the internet. Obviously, you would need energy. So, but yeah, I do foresee that.
Tailed into the European Securities Act as well. What many say that the Queen has essentially, that was when she resolved her power from that day on, when we went in. Who proves that? I don't know.
Well, it's funny you should mention the Queen. I did a few interviews from Portugal about a year ago, and it was around the time I think I interviewed a guy who reckoned he was going to be the King of England. And there were books being produced in Portugal, some were in English and some were in Portuguese. Now, the English books, it was about the king of the future King of England. And the English books were always out of print. But we've now got a copy of one in Portuguese, and I'm trying to get it translated. And it basically means that the Queen has never been our Queen in the first place.
Yes. How are you on this? Because I'm getting questions about this a lot. Where are you with that? Do you
literally? We're getting it translated because, as I say, the English books were always out of print. You know, you can only just imagine that the Crown Corporation wanted to have a limitless supply of a book written by the future King of England.
Yes.
Exciting. This is so exciting.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
So we have some good news.
What's that?
Well, this is hopefully some really good news. Something positive to look forward to.
I mean, personally, for me, this is where I think we're in a movie. Okay, so this is a movie plot line. This is sort of the final 6-7 scenes where everything goes into that crescendo where everything's been building up and everything now is coming to the climax. The good has just got strong again. They've regained some strength after being knocked back by the baddie. The baddie is going into stealth mode, ready to take him down and to reign forever. And now they're going at each other. And you won't get one without the other. All right? The karmic law, yin and yang, and everything else. So what I was discussing with the gentleman earlier, and what we're going to discuss on the next podcast, is who the representative of the new world was going to be from the crown themselves and being the emperor of the world. And they obviously said it was Prince William, but saying he has the specific bloodline. Charles is not his father. He was seeded. He was born on June the 21st, you know, induced as well, not just naturally born. He was induced by the moon goddess Diana, because she was the representation of the moon goddess anyway. That's how they held her. Whether she was in pure lineage, we don't know. But that's how they portrayed her. Her perfume was Isis. I don't know if you knew that. I actually bought a bottle for my mum back in the day.
What was it like?
It was a little bit like white musk or something. I forget what the name of it was. It was something similar to that. It was okay, but it was just the actual figure of it as well. It was very charming actually. But that's how they portrayed her. And obviously she had to bear the child or new emperor of the new age. So they're writing a new history, you see, just like they're trying to do now. So in 1,000 years' time, forget about Egyptology and Sumeria, Mesopotamia, it would be the new age. So we could date back to this as being the start of the world. Yeah? The ruler of the world, the ruler that came about from a moon goddess, a virgin moon goddess, born on the day where the sun is at its highest point in the meridian in the northern hemisphere. Okay, so they had all the elements in and around that. Yeah. And that's William. And 2015, which is a big year as well, when he turned 33. A lot happened in 2015. A lot of people don't know. I'll come to that in the next one. But again, the good side, they say, well, it could be the new king. It could be Donald Trump taking out the bad guys, although he's not necessarily good. He's still in it for himself. Obviously, he's not taking his salary. Oh, okay, he's not taking 300 grand a year. Great, but he's making deals on the back door for tens of millions, hundreds of millions. Okay. But he could be a bit corrupt. He could be slightly unhinged, right? But he's not inherently evil like what they say. I'm not saying this. The Nephilim bloodline that has ruled this kingdom for eons. So it's either or. I personally, I've never been more enthused and excited. Honestly, like I told you earlier, I've lost the fear, and I genuinely believe as long as we hold this vibration now of a higher. I'm not going all cliche talking the consciousness stuff, but as long as we're all just in a good mood, I'm not going to say let's meditate 10 hours a day and bring in December 20th, and it's not plausible for people. But as long as we, like you said, smell the flowers, put your blinking makeup on and enjoy it, put a nice bit of perfume on, go out in the sun, call your mum, call your friend, have a natter, remain in a good, positive mood. That's all we need to do going forward. I know it sounds ridiculously simple, but that's actually all we need to do.
Well, it is difficult because we're supposed to not judge others because of the lest we get judged ourselves. And so that's why this role is extremely hard. And, it's like people say, well, they always say to me, would you vote for Trump or would you vote for Biden? And I'm saying, look, I've just spent the last hour explaining why you give your sovereignty away when you join a political party. And then you finish off the conversation with, are you going for the Blues or going for the Red team? And I'm thinking like, but they're the same. And who runs the USA? And then there's like a deathly silence. Well, who runs the USA? Do you think it's Trump? Do you think it's Biden? I said, do you know that Trump has allowed, through his leadership, for a guy who's on the Bilderberg steering committee to be able to sign up to so many deals?
Yeah.
But would he, which compromises all our data, etc., etc. And you find a lot of these businessmen have a lot of fingers in lots of pies, and they may not front those businesses per se. So it's a bit like the secret covenant, isn't it? They don't know who we are. And, I was watching a parliamentary debate last week, and I've been watching an MP very closely. Tom Tugendhat.
Okay.
He is a Jew from Austria, I believe. But what I'm concerned about is somebody that I did a lot of research on last year, and his uncle was in the EU Commission, but he was invited to the Bilderberg Committee meeting last June. So I went through all the people who'd attended, because there must be a reason for why they're attending. So he's actually a sitting MP. And, he spoke in Parliament last week, and he said something about businesses. And he said, if you look at my financial interests, which I obviously have to fill in to stand in Parliament, you will see that I get involved with lots of businesses. So he's probably more like a sleeping partner. And this is what they do. They are trying to pretend it's nothing to do with them particularly. They might be putting a bit of money in there. Why are they in Parliament in the first place? We do not need people in Parliament that actually are only there to cut deals for their friends. I mean, look at the PPE cronyism debacle. And that's just like, it's a small fry compared to the other sort of treason that's committed. So they Parliament wrote a rule that in times of great emergencies, they didn't actually have to tender. They didn't have to put contracts out for tender. They could basically, reading between the lines, they could give it to their chums. And if anybody objected, well, it was too late, because the contracts had already been signed. In fact, contracts have already been dished out without even the paperwork. The paperwork was to follow.
Yeah, to come after. Yeah, absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And what's so incredible is the fact that the government only covered once last year about the food security problem, which we will have when we leave the European Union. And what does that mean? I mean, we only just saw the adverts, didn't we? 4 weeks ago, saying to all the businesses, are you sorted with your paperwork? Just think they've had 4.5 years to tell to tell the people what they really were planning right from the start.
Absolutely. I think it's going to take effect pretty quickly after January. I think January is going to be a dark month. Where do I start with this? But I know we got about 5, 6, 7 minutes left. But we're an island at the end of the day. We're going to struggle. They're going to make sure we're struggling on some degree. And I think it's all going to come to pass with, common purpose comes into it with what they're planning, the vaccines and other things to get us desperate, to get us scared, to get us reliant, with the payouts people now can have from today as well, the self-employed, which doesn't barely cover business rates for most businesses. And shops are already shut where I am now. And I'm hearing, one of my favorite cafes has, it's demoralizing, that's the perfect word. It's demoralizing. And that's what they want. They want to demoralize people. That's what it's all about, to weaken them, weaken their immune system as a result, weaken their passion, weaken their thoughts. So eventually just cave in. And it's all in here. I bought this just after this was in July. I put it on order because it came up as, I wasn't going to show it up, but it's been touted around for the last 2 months. COVID-19, the Great Reset.
How much did that cost you?
This cost me precisely, Caroline. I might have paid an extra couple of dollars actually to get it. It was about 15 quid or something, I'm not sure. Probably a couple of quid in Klaus's back pocket, damn it. But I put it to order in mid-July, literally the blueprint, okay, of what's going to come. And since well, you've been saying certain things from the summer, only my close-knit of people, because I haven't posted much the last 3+ months. Saying it's in there, it's in this book, and this book that I read 6 years ago, right, The Big Reset, which no one knows about and no one's even mentioned. Okay, this is where they talk about they go on about the system reset, and they'll need to find a new anchor before the year 2020. It literally talks about the year 2020 in this book. All right, and gold, there being a new value-backed gold-backed currency worth $5,000 to $7,000, $8,000 per troy ounce. All right, so this is why I said end of last year, and I mentioned in one of our last podcasts, gold and silver is going to be what personally I'm going to try and get with any spare cash I've got, because I do believe it's going to go up in nominal value, and it's going to have a comparative value compared, because they'll be backed again, like since Nixon debased it, right, with Bretton Woods back in the 70s. So we're going to see that. So this is why I could see this coming anyway into 2020. I knew something was going to happen because this bloody book speaks about it, which I read 4.5 years ago.
Oh,
before
really?
Before Trump even got in. All right, and so I was saying to friends, so when I see this book released in 2020 by the guy that set up the World Economic Forum, who dresses like Darth Vader on a day-to-day basis, you've got to ask yourself, as you do, this is no coincidence. As you quite rightly mentioned, Caroline, there are no blinking coincidences. And this book, we know, I mean, I've written a small book before, I like nothing really, not published or anything, but even then that took me 6 months, and I didn't even end up with something great, nothing noteworthy of selling on Amazon. So for this 300+ pages of articulate information talking about specific figures, okay, this was released in July. And the COVID-19 situation wasn't declared an actual pandemic until late March, or mid to late March. So there's just 3 good months in between you've got to prepare. So that, I mean, come on, like even just that alone for me says it all. So we know what's coming, and it just basically says, because I've read it 1.5 times now. The second time I've read it, the half time I've read it, I've just gone through bits and highlighted certain bits, like I did with the Big Reset one. So we know what they want. Whether they will get it is another thing. I do genuinely believe something ordained for us in a good way, whether you're spiritual, religious, or what. I do think something good is going to come on this realm in the next 6 to 8 weeks, and it will be good for us. It'll sort of be another blow and a sucker punch back to them, if you like, and it will up our energy, and it will be down for them. Whether it'll mean the people are victorious or not, I've got concerns about that, because I know a lot of people at the moment are still waiting for the vaccine that's been ushered through within months. But what concerned me this morning, Caroline, is this article that was posted regarding it spoke about the army. There was an article about the army saying that they were doing a Al-Qaeda style-esque army spies to take on anti-vax militants. Have you seen that?
No,
yes,
because I was in this training session this morning.
Right,
so.
okay. In the Times, it came out yesterday actually, it says, I'll just actually quote it, it's by here. The army has mobilized an elite information warfare unit renowned for assisting operations against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban to counter online propaganda against vaccines, as Britain prepares to deliver its first injections within days. So, I thought, what do you mean within days? I know they've been saying for a good 6 to 8 weeks now, possibly a little bit more, the end of the year, by Christmas. We're looking at that. But these companies have only been working on this or entered into any meaningful trials late summer.
Well, the thing is, somebody put on social media. Somebody put on social media yesterday that she knows the person who works at the pharmaceutical laboratories in Oxford, and they've been working on it for 7 years.
7 years. Well, yeah. I mean, that would make more sense, wouldn't it? Because 7 years is a time you would go through the trials, animals and whatever else. You would grow, microbes and everything under us. You need time, weeks and months and months. You've been waiting for blood tests before and something's not quite right. You've got an anomaly there that you might get an infection or something with your skin cells. You've got to then have another test, and that can take another week. And all these things go on, and they think something can be done within this short space of time. And then you've got to think, well, if it is, well, what's the long-term effects? We kind of know with the flu vaccine that with the flu vaccine, we know long-term. People have had it decades ago. Okay, might make you feel a bit crap. Might not even do anything to, especially if it's last year's flu vaccine. There's a slight new strain this autumn, this fall, and you're vitamin D deficient. It'll be slightly counterproductive anyway. But does it really kill you? Can it do real harm? These are the questions we kind of do have answered in a way with the flu vaccine, but we won't really have answered. I think this is a lot of people's concerns. Now, I'm not saying anything about it because I'm not getting sensitive, I don't want to say anything. But for me, logically, as a person with a sensible IQ and can just look at things logically and ask questions, I would say, why is this being rushed in when we're still under the 5-year average for deaths? Children are dying more of famine throughout the world. Even the TB deaths have hit 1.5 million, I think. And, you with TB alone, you're very, very, very contagious about that. But we don't lock down nations because we're petrified of catching TB, do we? And so it's just sense with this, and it's scary when they mention the army. And I do think armies have families. Will they really push this on people if they're not quite sitting right with them is another thing I don't know. But you might have guys in the army will follow orders no matter what, which a lot do, and it's a bit scary. I do find that scary, but I think that's their only weapon. That's their only weapon, because these people hiding behind the shadows, as you said earlier, they have no power. They're wimps. I'd love to get in the ring with them and have 5 rounds.
Well, I think what was really interesting, and we can sort of finish off with this, because I know we both got to go.
Yeah.
Reminded me, I was listening to a church service yesterday, and the pastor was talking about vaccinations. And he said, you might not want one because we're not being made to have it. He said, but what happens if you want to go to Spain next year? So it's been sold to the congregation, which is on Zoom, remotely. It's been sold that the benefits of a vaccination are having a return to foreign holidays. And it just, when I spoke to people of the older generation years ago when I went into campaigning for Brexit, they said we were taken in on the premise of cheap foreign holidays. And it's almost like the devil keeps wanting to basically entice the people. Yes. It's the carrot. And if the carrot isn't sufficient and we don't cover enough people, then we'll go in and do that sedation of the people according to that common purpose meeting. And you can see now how real this is. But, you know, they could just mean, I mean, the MP's letters have been very, very sinister in their responses to colleagues of mine who've been asking, are we being mandatorily vaccinated? And they've just been sort of saying, well, we're putting COVID people first, and we're going to treat deaths with humanity and this, that, and the other. And it's just not the sort of response that decent men and women would be responding with. So you can only expect the worst, and prep and pray, because, as you say, we are going to be taken to the wire. I'm perhaps not as optimistic as you with this 6 to 8 weeks. Something's going to happen. You know, we haven't found out exactly who the Antichrist is yet. People say it's Obama, people say it's Prince William, and somebody said it was... Sorry?
Who do you think it is, love, if you have to put your money on anyone? I
honestly don't know, because I've been interviewing a lady at the beginning of this year, and she was saying it was this guy called Van Doon, who was born in 1963, I think end of May 1963, and he keeps in the shadows. Because I know a lot of people say it's Obama, or they think it's Prince William. It's interesting that Prince William and Kate have, because of their roles, they've got so involved with the mental health of our children, and I find that really, really distressing for families, because, you know, the children have gone back to school. They've even Kate has been putting out questionnaires about how the family been, you know, how they've been faring with children and lockdowns, and not everybody's got detached houses with gardens. You know, a lot of people don't, and so to be under with your children all the time, I mean, it must be a nightmare.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, but she was in the paper yesterday. They were congratulating her on wearing the same blouse twice. How Kate, the Duchess, was recycling her £780 blouse, and she'd wore it twice. Wow, let's congratulate her for that epic achievement. Thank you, Kate. Well done, my love. You wore the same £780 blouse twice. You should have a lot of credit for that. So, but yeah, I mean, that she's an absolute darling in the media, and yeah, that has weight with me. In and around when he was born, the story around him, who the mother was, the sacrifice of the mother years later, and that has more weight with me. I've got a few other theories I won't go into, but yeah, it's hard to tell. It's very hard to tell. We don't know, and I think we will find out. I don't know whether it will be explicit in just revealing itself, or himself or herself.
But I think we've got to wrap it up, because, you know, I've got to rush at this particular time of the day.
Oh, right, okay, you get on. I know 2:45 you had to leave. Sorry, Caroline. Got to get on. Time flies when we're getting together. So
we'll do another one in a couple of weeks' time, yeah?
Before absolutely. Three, 4 things. I knew it would take time, so I didn't cover really some really good stuff. I'm looking at some bits now anyway, which I'd like to cover, so I can't really speak about it with any fluidity, so I'd go into next time.
Okay.
And yeah, and obviously we'll have more time under our belts closer to Christmas of figuring what the hell's going on. So we'll go there, my love. Anyway,
thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody at home for watching. And please do share, because we might not be online for much longer. Anybody might not be online for much longer, especially if there's an energy crisis. Thank you. And thanks, Matt. And I've got to fly.
Bless you all. Take care, love.
Positive. Goodbye. Thank you.